Yeah.
Like take MK Ultra, which you've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
That's kind of created modern society.
Right.
Like, if you think about it, like it created the whole hippie culture of the 60s because the government was giving acid to every John in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, MK is very interesting because it's these things that people just really don't know about.
But it's definitely true. But it's always labeled a conspiracy.
It's always labeled a conspiracy. It was a government basically trying to figure out how to control people's minds through psychedelic drugs, through certain tests, through, depending on who you talk to, through very traumatic events that they either put people through or took people from those traumatic events. And so, so the reality is you have during the Cold War, you had the Russians and us basically trying to create super soldiers. We're experimenting with the idea of what would it take to create somebody who was, we could split their mind up so that they were the super spy, that they, wouldn't be able to confess any information because they genuinely didn't know it because that was in one part of their brain they couldn't access. It was one personality and the other person. And, what about a Manchurian candidate where you could essentially just have somebody be the president or be a senator, but literally be secretly controlled by, the group of people who had devised this, behavioral technology or technique. Their success level with that is, debatable. There are some people that believe that they were very successful at it and they were able to use it on people like Sirhan, who assassinated Bobby Kennedy, and that it still works to this day. There are some people that will tell you that they were never able to do it. They were never able to hijack somebody's mind 100%. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. There are some very interesting things that people point to as examples of MK Ultra working. Sirhan's an example of that, where you look at it, you go, hey, it is a guy behaving very oddly. And, I don't know. You have a guy that assassinated, tried to kill Reagan, quote unquote, because he, supposedly loved Jodie Foster. And then you look at this guy, John Hinckley Jr., the Hinckley family and the Bush family were actually friends. Neil Bush was having dinner with the Hinckley family the day, or was scheduled to have dinner with them the day that one of their sons shot the president, which would make who the president? Neil Bush's father. Again, if it happened in Russia, we'd all go, see, Putin, conspiracy. Happens in America, we all just kind of ignore it. Very interesting to me. That's just a string of fun coincidences. Again, to me, it's a coincidence if like you're on a train and somebody next to you grew up in your town. That's a coincidence. The idea that of however many million people were in the country at that time, not as many as we have now, but a lot. The idea that the guy that tried to assassinate the president, his family was having dinner with the vice president's son.
Because I didn't hear that.
Fact. Can go look it up. Having dinner with the vice president's son, the guy who stood to inherit the job if Reagan was killed. That is an interesting coincidence. Just a fun coincidence that is 100% fact. You can look it up. It's Washington Post, New York Times, real deal. And why did he try to assassinate Reagan? Supposedly because he loved Jodie Foster.
Which is a narrative.
That's the narrative. So, I mean, again, do you know? I mean, what do I know? I just look at all these things and go, this seems odd. Because as a comedian, I think my job is to go, this seems odd. That's the base level of my job, is to go, there's a frozen yogurt place on every corner and yet people think it's healthy. That seems odd. And I write a dumb bit about that. Or, hey, the president's assassin, his brother, was going to have dinner with the vice president. That seems odd.
Okay, but does it seem odd that they would schedule a dinner, almost like a celebratory dinner, the day a family member is...
I find it odd they know each other. I find it odd that they even know each other on a level where they could be friends to that degree. Of all the people in the world that tried to assassinate the president, the idea that their families are close, and again, does it necessarily mean something I don't know, but it makes you look in a country that was a mature country that was being dealt with honestly by the press. That would have been a bigger story. And I think people would have started going, wait a minute. We want answers on this more than just JFK. Same thing. We want answers on this.
Yeah. By the way, you took a photo of yourself at the X, which, by the way, is very weird. Yeah. As you pointed out, that in Dallas, there's an X right at the spot where John F. Kennedy was shot. Yes. A week earlier, my wife Robin and I, we were in Dallas and did an Instagram video right at the X. And there's I don't know if you met this guy. There's a guy standing right there. At least he was then.
Yeah.
Where he kind of describes, and he's selling a DVD. Here's where the shots came from. Here's, Lee Harvey Oswald was actually on the second floor eating lunch, and he was eating with his boss, and he wasn't on the 7th floor or the 6th floor or whatever. And no shots even came from the school board depository. School book depository. So I sort of feel like that was clearly a conspiracy or some kind of cover up, but for whatever reason, nobody wanted to investigate it.
Well, nobody wants to investigate anything. I mean, and that's a reality. People don't want to investigate it. The Boston Marathon bombing is very odd. You had 2 guys that the FBI said, we have no idea who they are. Then Russian intelligence came out and said, yeah, you do. We told you who they were. And then the FBI is like, okay, we did know who they were. And then it comes out that the FBI had some prior relationship with them, even though they've kind of denied this. And then they had to kind of walk back their denial. And it was probably a case of like the FBI recruiting them as informants. And then maybe something had happened, because the FBI does this all the time. This is how the FBI, does a lot of their work, is through the use of confidential informants. This is what they do. They entrap people. Entrapment is what the FBI does. They send a guy into a mosque with a bomb, and they try to get 3 other people to agree to go bomb somewhere, and then they go, you're all in jail. This is what the FBI does. There's FBI agents right now in an office in Virginia pretending to be 15-year-olds on the dark web, entrapping substitute math teachers that are pedophiles. I mean, this is just what they do. So,
right, I don't know if you remember. Well, it was before you were born, but in 1980 or 1970, there was the whole ab scam thing.
Yeah,
where the FBI pretended to be sheiks bribing all these politicians. Of
course,
total entrapment.
Yeah. Whitey Bulger, they have informants. This is what they do. And a lot of times they let those informants go out and do bad things as long as they keep informing. So the Boston Marathon bombing happened, and the FBI was like, we don't know who these guys are. And then Russian intelligence was like, we told you exactly who they were. And then you're like, these guys were traveling back and forth to like, I forget the name of it's Dagestan, but where is that? That's in Chechnya, or and it's like the Caucasus and shit, like these hotbed for terrorist activity, hotbed. And they're coming back and forth to America, and it's okay and it's fine. And then eventually this horrible bombing happens and people start asking questions, and it's very weird. And they shut down the whole city of Boston. They catch these 2 guys in a boat. They're trying to kill both of them. Clearly, they end up killing one of them. And then the trial's really not covered. And then they put SAM, special administrative measures, on the attorneys. Not only the Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, but also the attorneys can't speak. The attorneys can't go and be interviewed about this whole thing. And then the reason they give for that is, well, national security. We don't want to inspire other terrorist acts. But they were very clear that these 2 acted alone. So it's like, well, if they acted alone and they're not part of a larger network, then why would an attorney being interviewed about the case? So there's clearly something they don't want getting out. I mean, this is just a weird situation. It's just odd, and nobody really, because people think you're like insulting people's memory by asking questions. It's like, no, I'm just very curious about, and here's the other thing, and this is verifiable fact. The Tsarnaev family, Tamerlan, Dzhokhar, their grandfather, Rusli Tsarnaev, you're going to love this because this is just fun and it's factual. Rusli Tsarnaev, who's their uncle. He's not their grandfather, he's their uncle. Because I'll make this point and somebody will be like, it's actually their uncle, as if they've done anything. It's like, it's the same, Their uncle, Rusli Tsarnaev, married Samantha Fuller. Samantha Fuller is a daughter of Graham Fuller. Graham Fuller was a career, not only CIA agent, but the architect of our like Mideast policy for the CIA. Big CIA guy. Big CIA guy's daughter marries Rusli Tsarnaev. His grandchildren or his nephews become the first terrorist attack on our soil since 9/11. Interesting. Very weird. Shadowy labyrinth of connections there. I don't know what that means. I can't tell you what it means. I know that that's a fact. And I know that that's very interesting for me. And it's an odd coincidence that this guy married into a CIA family and his nephews end up having some type of relationship with the FBI that the FBI doesn't come out about. And then they end up doing this horrible thing in Boston. It's weird. And a mind like mine, it's hard to shut those things off.
Well, but I think that's the solution. Like you say,
Yeah.
like this scares you at night, all of these things. I think the solution is doing what you do, which is asking why, talking about it, and you're able to say, "Hey, I'm just a comedian," and that kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
passes over the newspapers and all these people who try
Right.
to deny or refute. Like, "Hey, I'm just a comedian. I'm just saying this thing looks interesting and it's funny,"
Right.
and which is what Jon Stewart would always say, right? So Jon Stewart really was the only actual news source in the
Yeah, it
country,
was very
and
funny.
and
Yeah.
if anyone ever called him on it, he said, "Oh no, I'm not news. I'm just a comedian." But he was actually the only news source. Everyone
Yeah.
even said, "This is my
Yeah.
news source."
Yeah.
And I think
It's
now,
true.
I think there was this wave where everyone was reading, like let's say a decade ago, there was all these popular self-help books, and then you have for the past 3 to 5 years all of these popular intellectuals that kind of did the podcast, scene. And then now I think though the real voices are comedians like yourself, like some others who are you're seeing them. Your podcast, I imagine, has been
Yeah.
shooting up in downloads for the
Go.
past 2 years
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because now this is the voice. It's the only voices people can trust because you're asking the why, and there's no rules about what conditions you can put on it. So you can connect the dots any way you want, and then it's up to people to decide whether to trust it or not.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, what I do is entertainment, but there is some info there. Everything, I'm not lying about everything I'm saying. You could Google it, you could verify it, you could check it out. So all checks out. The conclusions you draw are your own, and I wrestle with them. I have different conclusions every night
Yeah,
about it. I'm like, what does this mean? What is,
yeah, and I